Hello everyone, welcome to the AZ-204 certification tutorial brought to you by CloudTag. In this video, we will be learning about learning part 2, implement Azure functions. Let's get started.
On the next learning part, that is on Azure functions. So what is actually Azure functions, right? So Azure functions also comes under the category of platform as a service, right? So but why do we actually make use of Azure functions? We spoke about the other platform as a service, that is Azure web app, right? So in Azure web app, we can just deploy our applications so that applications can scale up, scale down automatically, and they have easy deployment opportunities, right? Be it from CI/CD or whatever it is, right? We are able to achieve a deployment in web app itself. But why do we need another service for deployment for our application to run? That is Azure functions. Why do we actually need this? Right? So basically, right, take an example of small activities like image compressions or notifications, or certain automatic tasks that you want to do, right? So let's take an example of one scenario where you want to take up automatic, you have a database, okay, and you have a web application is constantly interacting with databases and doing the CRUD operations, right? And for you as an administrator, you need to actually take a backup of this particular database every day, okay? So you know how to take the backup, and you want to automate this particular process. Okay, so manually taking backup is an option, but it's not the recommended option, because every day you have to sit and open this, open your laptop, get into the database server, and then take the backup, store it, version control it. All these will be your hectic job. If you automate this particular process, then it's well and good, right? So like every day you get an alarm every day, at whatever time you want to get up, okay, you get an alarm ringing, okay, and it wakes you up, right? So it does it automatically because you have configured it that way. Similarly, here you have these activity here where you want to take a backup of this particular database every day. Maybe let's say at 6 p.m. every day you want to take up this particular backup. So what would be your automated way? Would you write an application? First approach would be, you can write an application and you can write the logic inside it, and then so that it will take the backup, okay? And imagine that you're going with this particular option, okay, creating the application and then deploying this particular application onto the server, right? Like how we did with the VM or web app, right? So like that, you just do it, and things are working fine, very well and good. But just think it, with the utilization point of view, right? So every day at 6 p.m. only this particular application is getting triggered and it's running. Let's say it takes 5 minutes to actually take the backup. So 6 to 6:05 only, then it's actually running this particular application, and for this you have hosted the application onto a server all the time, and the application is there 24/7, right? Don't you think it is not effective? This approach is not good, because the activity, the logic is been executed only for 5 minutes. For that, your entire application has been deployed onto a server, and with no one being utilizing your application, it's up and running. It's consuming your compute resource, it's consuming your storage resource, it's consuming your time, maintenance, and many more. So just imagine these kinds of incidents or these kinds of activities, right? You don't have to spend time writing and deploying the application, the business logic, small business logic into an application and then deploying it. Instead, you can look for Azure Functions for it. Azure Functions is a serverless service. What do I mean by serverless service? It is just a piece of code. Okay, it is just a piece of code which gets triggered whenever someone triggers it, which will run whenever someone triggers it. A trigger could be anything. Okay, it could be a manual trigger. Okay, it could be a manual trigger, or it could be an automated trigger, right? Anything it could be. So this particular code will run only when it is getting triggered, or it could be scheduled trigger as well, right? So this code will run whenever a trigger has been scheduled, and it will only run for the number of minutes or number of time. Okay, the time to which the code completes. Okay, the activity completes, and then it will stop. That's why I call it as a serverless service, right? All you have to do is just choose your preferred language, write your business logic, set up your trigger, and that's it. Some other examples or some other scenarios for Azure Functions, I would say, is image compression. Okay, so let's take an example that you have a website. Okay, and users are uploading images onto the website, and the website actually stores those images into a storage account. Storage account is a storage service in Azure. Okay, they store the images into the storage account, the raw images onto the storage account. Now you as an administrator, you have to compress this particular image, maintain this particular images. So what you do, you can write one Azure function here which will actually pick up this particular image here, compress it, and then store it inside another storage account. This is one utilization. The other thing is, or whenever there's an upload operation onto a storage account, if you want any one of you to get notified, okay, Azure Functions can do it. Right? So simple tasks like this, there are many utilization tasks like this that you can actually do it, right? Which you can actually make use of Azure Functions to do it. Other examples I would say which you can use for Azure Functions is, let's say inside your Azure portal, right? You have different users, right? In your company, if you're just using your Azure account, you might have all the employees might have access to the Azure portal, and they extensively work on the particular Azure portal. Maybe for development purpose, they create certain services, and they release certain services. Creation, deletion, everything is part of development tasks, right? So let's say every day you need you as an Azure account administrator needs to make sure that no resources in your development account needs to be running, okay, after 6 p.m. Okay, after 6 p.m. if you don't want any resources to be running in your development account, you can write one Azure function, and you can write the logic in such a way that it will scan through all the regions, all the compute resources, networking, storage resources, and make sure that no instances are running. And if the instances are running, it should actually give one notification for you. That is the use case. Okay, so because if you keep the instances running, you are liable to pay for it. Okay, so I said about the pay-as-you-go model, right? So users have to pay for the number of hours that they're using. So to reduce the cost, you can actually enforce this particular methodology, where write one Azure function which will scan through your resources in your Azure account and list the resources that are running. Okay, and then if it is in the running state, you should inquire, you as an administrator should inquire that particular person who have created this particular resource, and then make sure that it is getting deleted. So you need to avoid unwanted charges. So that's another use case. So these are the small use cases that I'm talking about. Okay, so let's go and create one of the Azure function, and let's see how it's working. So I'm just clicking on Microsoft Azure, and there is one service called function app. You can just click on that, create. Okay, and here you see you can set up a subscription, you can set up a resource group. I'm choosing already existing resource group here. Then function app, I'm just saying okay. Now here also you can just determine whether you have the code deployed into a you have the code in terms of the repository, or in terms of a container image. You can go with the code. Then if you go with the container image, then you have different options underneath, so you can just choose your language, whichever language it could be it your Java, Python, .NET, whatever it could be, you can just choose it. Okay, then operating system, whichever you want to. Okay, and here's the hosting methodologies, right? So very important here, right? So this plan, you have to be very careful if you're when using your Azure functions. There are different hosting methodologies. One is the consumption methodology, consumption option. The other is the functions premium. The other is the app service plan. Remember app service plan that we discussed previously? The same app service plan that you created for web app could be used for function app as well, because they are serving as the compute resource only, right? So you can use the same app service plan. Consumption meaning how much ever you use, that much only you pay, right? So that is consumption. If it is functions premium, you are actually isolating, or you are allocating certain set of resources for you so that your function will use it. Okay, so that's something that you can choose. If you want to integrate a storage account, yes, by default you should have a storage account associated with the function app, so you can just create one or associate an already existing one, right? Then networking, I'm keeping the networking as default, monitoring also as default. Coming to the deployment part, if you want to do a deployment via GitHub Actions, you can do it. You can write GitHub workflows and then deploy it here. That is also doable, right? And then review and create. So now, as this is getting created, let me explain one more thing. I said that every function needs to have a piece of code, right? You're gonna have a function app, and inside that you're gonna have writing the piece of code. Now to run this particular function, or to run this particular code, right, there are two things. One is the trigger, the other one is the bindings, right? So what is a trigger? I spoke about it already. These are the mechanisms to make this particular code run. And when it comes to bindings, okay, so you can bind certain things to this particular code. Maybe if you want to install certain things to make this code run, you can associate that using the bindings. Okay, so there are two kinds of bindings. One is the input binding, the other is the output binding. Input binding is kind of input to this particular code. Output binding is what you want to get out of this particular code. Okay, so that's output binding. Okay, so I think the function app would have been created. Let's just refresh our screen. Okay, great. So this is a function app. If you just browse it, you'll have the default function app page running in, which denotes that function app is successfully running. And to work with function app also, there are different ways. Okay, so you can work with it in the portal, or if you are a developer and you are going to work with your Visual Studio, yes, you can clone it with your Visual Studio and write your logic there. Or if you have any CLI, you can just work with any CLI methodologies as well. Let me just create a function quickly and show you how things are. I'm going with the first option. You can choose the templates because Azure has these many templates available with it. Okay, so you can choose the template. I'm choosing HTTP trigger and creating a function inside my function app. You see, here you have the options. Okay, so if you want to write a code, HTTP trigger code. Okay. See, you have these many files, function.json, run.csx, all these things. You just have to look into this. This is a HTTP trigger, right? And these are the bindings. Function.json sets you the bindings, and by default it's having some set of code already available. So you can utilize this code or write your own logics here, and then you can run it. So I'll just click on test and run, and I'll just say run. You see, hello Azure, this is HTTP triggered function executed successfully. So it's kind of, you can test it here itself, you can run it here itself and make sure that your function is actually running. Okay, so that's about Azure Functions team. Okay, so detailed explanation would be given in the actual course, but I just wanted to give you an overview here. The next topic for discussion is Cosmos DB.
Thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned for the next part and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel.